welcome to 60 Days of Fright. And today we start with number 60, The Return of the Living Dead. Many consider 1985's Return of the Living Dead one of the greatest zombie movies ever made, and it has a strong case. Though it's not the best, I still say 1968's Night of the Living Dead is the reigning, defending, undisputed champion of that genre. Now, this movie was written and directed by Dan O'Bannon, which some of you may not know was actually a co-writer on the Ridley Scott film Alien in 1979. But Night of the Living Dead does have its share of first. It was the first zombie movie where the zombies could actually speak and communicate with the living. It was also the first zombie movie where they referenced brains. Because in other zombie movies prior to this one, the zombies just craved flesh. And it was described that the reason why the zombies craved brains is because it eased the pain of their undead state. Another first for this movie was that in traditional zombie movies, you would kill the zombie by striking them in the head, or a bullet wound to the head, or any kind of blunt force trauma to the head. But in this movie, that doesn't work.
I hit the fucking brain! Then do something else, for goddamn it!
And even if you burn the zombies, that's a no-no, because the smoke from the burning cadaver or the burning body goes into the atmosphere and then comes and rains back down on the ground. And then you've got the undead even coming out of their graves, out of graveyards. So it was almost like you were fighting an unwinnable war. And even though this movie has no ties to the George A. Romero classic, it's still referenced heavily in this movie, especially at the first.
Did you see that movie, Night of the Living Dead?
When Frank and Freddy, before they go down to the basement and unleash the Tar Man, Frank, trying to impress Freddy, tells him a story about how the supposed Night of the Living Dead was based on a true story.
Where the corpses start eating the people, right? Sure. What about it?
Did you know that movie was based on a true case?
Now, the reason Night of the Living Dead is referenced so much in this movie is because this movie also had John Russo and Russell Strenner, who worked with George Romero in the 1968 classic. This movie was the perfect combination of comedy, action, horror, and gore. Like, one of my favorite scenes in this movie is really at the beginning, and it's when the three nitwits that inadvertently bring the dead back to life are trying to take down one of the reanimated cadavers. And as they get him on the ground, one of them takes a pickaxe and puts it into the back of his head. Doesn't kill him, and then the other two, as they're holding him down, just saw him. You'll just have to see it to believe. Now, the real star, the icon, if you will, of this film was the Tar Man, who was played by Alan Trotman. Now, Alan Trotman was an actor and a puppeteer who had ties to the Jim Henson Company. And when you watched the way Trotman played the part of the Tar Man, he played it a lot like a puppet on a string. He moved real slow and labored because his body was in such a decayed state that there was no way he could move fast. But the thing that made it unique was he could independently think. Even Trotman's facial expressions in the prosthetic makeup for Tar Man was both terrifying and amazing at the same time. They don't do practical effects much like that anymore, and most of that is because it's kind of gotten lazy now with the advent of CGI. But at that time in the 80s had some of the best practical effects that you could ever come across. I mean, just to name a few: Howling, American Werewolf in London, this movie, you could say some of the Friday the 13th with Decayed Jason. You go on and on. Oh, and before I forget, another popular icon that also came from this movie was Linnea Quigley as the punk rocker Trash. and her sexy, seductive dance on top of a tombstone in the graveyard. Just like in the George Romero Night of the Living Dead, this movie doesn't have a happy ending either. Spoiler alert, the town gets fucking nuked. Everything gets so out of control and the zombies take over all of Louisville, Kentucky, which the movie was actually shot in LA, but they portrayed it as being in Louisville, Kentucky. And plus, there was a punk rock scene in Louisville, which doesn't seem to fit, but it worked. But anyway, the town got fucking nuked. So, no happy ending. But also, guys, a little bit of trivia for you. Some of the zombie extras in the movie were asked and or paid to eat real calf brains. And director Dan O'Bannon joined them, as he said that he would not ask any of his actors to do anything that he wouldn't do. But guys, Return of the Living Dead is one of the greatest horror comedy movies ever made. It has withstood the test of time, and it is definitely worth a watch. Thank you guys for joining me on 60 Days of Fright, and join me again tomorrow when we have number 59. This has been John, and I'll see you again next time on Behind the Feeds. Ooh.